Hi, I'm Rosenberg. Welcome to my latest YouTube video and podcast. I'm really pleased with how this self-love recovery mailbag is turning out. For those people that are new or this is the first time you're hearing this, I ask you guys to write in the comment section for the YouTube video viewers a question you'd like me to answer at the end of the video. And for the podcast listeners, is to send us that question an email at help@selfloverecovery.com. So the question I'm going to answer is going to be the subject of today's video. And the question goes, hi Ross, can you help me understand why someone with narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder do not believe they have any problems? I can't comprehend how they wouldn't know that they are hurting someone. Where does the core shame come from? Why does the anger encapsulate the core shame to react in maladaptive behaviors instead of feeling a sense of remorse immediately? Why does their brain not fully develop? Why does a person with BPD have an imagined fear of abandonment when they're the ones who cause someone else to be hurt, and sometimes they are the ones who are abandoning? Your help in clarifying this would be much appreciated. By the way, this is not one question, but still, it encapsulates a subject I want to talk about today. Many of you have read my books, The Human Magnet Syndrome and the Codependency Revolution, or have seen my YouTube videos, podcasts, or even my seminar videos at selfloverecovery.com. I talk extensively about pathological narcissists. It's not that I specialize in them and wanted to be an expert in them, but it's only through the understanding of these three disorders, the pathological narcissistic disorders, narcissistic, borderline, and antisocial personality disorders. It's with an understanding of these three disorders and how the human magnet syndrome works. The human magnet syndrome, as you guys can read in my book or might know already, it basically explains this opposite attraction of why giving, sacrificing, codependents, or people who I call self-love deficient, always fall in love with people who are pathologically narcissistic, who are takers and needers. And that pattern is one that does not change throughout a lifetime and generations. Because my primary job and passion is giving psychotherapy or helping people through my self-love recovery treatment program to overcome self-love deficit disorder or codependency. And my way that I conceptualize it is a very deeply embedded, entrenched trauma disorder. And to get through this, to overcome it, to neutralize it, and get to the cure, which is neutralizing self-love deficit disorder to self-love abundance, you have to know about pathological narcissists. So in a way, I accidentally became an expert on narcissism. I didn't do it on purpose, I promise. I think I have at least 5 videos that have at least 1 million views on them each, and the subject is on narcissism. In fact, I think I have one video, Don't Take the Mask Off a Covert Narcissist, Just Run. I think that's got 4 million views. I still can't believe it, but I digress. For me to help people with self-love deficit disorder, SLDs, self-love deficients, I have to teach them everything that is necessary to know about these 3 pathological narcissism personality disorders. And this question, and thank you for the question, begs a very important answer. Why do they do what they do and don't seem to understand the pain that they are inflicting? Do they do it on purpose? This is a complicated answer because each of the 3 personality disorders, and I'm going to shorten them to NPD, BPD, and ASPD. By the way, antisocial personality disorder is another name for someone who is sociopathic or sociopathy. Because of these 3 disorders that fit in my category, pathological narcissism, they all have core narcissism. Despite the vast difference between each of the disorder. And I'll just simplify it. Antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD, they're sociopaths, they're con men, con women, con people. They lie, they cheat, they don't have empathy, they don't have remorse, they don't really know how to naturally be human when it comes to emotions social rules, connections, and relationships. It's completely broken and it's permanently broken. All they know is that the only way that they're going to feel good is that they have to take it from someone else. And if there's a consequence, they don't care. It doesn't matter. These are liars, cheaters, manipulators, gaslighters, etc. In that whole disorder, they're narcissistic. It's all about them. Now let's look at borderline personality disorder. They are highly reactive. They react to real or perceived abandonment by freaking out, by exploding, by screaming, yelling, and trying to hurt or even destroy the person that triggered them. Often, this is a person that they love the most. I know to someone who's never been in a relationship with an individual with BPD, it makes no sense. But when they get triggered, they go into a rage and all they can think about is hurting that person in order to defend themselves against the real or perceived abandonment. And with BPD, the perceived abandonment is the hardest part to understand because it makes no sense to most people, including the victim of their rage. For example, when I was in a relationship with someone with borderline personality disorder, I had my niece over for dinner, and this person who I was in a relationship with, for confidentiality reasons, you notice I changed that around, did not like my curried meatballs. Since I was the family cook, and she was glad that I cooked because I was better and she was not, and it worked out. But she didn't like that recipe, and I really wanted to make it, so I persevered. And when my niece said, "Uncle Ross, these meatballs are delicious," and I smiled, I looked at her, and seriously, I'm not exaggerating. I smiled and I looked at her, and then she blew up. She screamed, yelled, threw the food at the wall, and acted as if I said horribly demeaning things, and I was a threat to her. My poor niece, I had to witness it. But I bring that up because in that instance, there was a perception of abandonment in the mind of this individual. And I'm assuming, because I couldn't get into it, but after living with her for so many years, I had some insight eventually. She experienced me purposefully humiliating her in front of my niece in order to make my niece love me and not like her. That was a case where she distorted what happened and jumped to a conclusion of something that never really existed. It was just about the meatballs. So the core narcissism for people with borderline personality disorder is this self-centered need to be loved and not abandoned. What makes it tricky is when someone with BPD loves you, they love you with passion. They do nice things for you. In those moments when they feel connected to you and you are the object of love and adulation, they have empathy, sympathy. So it doesn't seem like they're narcissistic. It doesn't seem like they're what I call pathologically narcissistic. But when you view their disorder from a diagnostic vantage point, you're not seeing unconditional loving, kindness, respect, trust, giving, protection. It's all conditional. It's all based upon making them feel like they are loved, safe, and free from the worry of abandonment. It is not natural. It is not unconditional by what we would consider in healthy relationships. And the proof of that is their reaction to real or perceived abandonment. So in that sense, it's pathologically narcissistic, the core narcissism. And the last of the three is narcissistic personality disorder. Well, that's easy to demonstrate their core narcissism. They're grandiose. They think they're more important. They deserve better treatment. They're entitled. They're vain. They're egotistic. They're self-centered. They're selfish. I can go on and on. Pathological narcissism is really completely involved in the whole disorder. That is why it's called narcissistic personality disorder. So now that I've established that these three pathological narcissism disorders, all of which SLDs tend to fall in love with despite their intention and promises to themselves that they're not going to fall in love with another person that's going to hurt them. So now I want to go to the question asked, why don't they believe they have behavior problems? To answer that, I have to briefly explain how these disorders are created. And this is a simplistic explanation, but it's very accurate. A child's adult mental health is largely formed by his or her attachment experiences from infancy to all the way up to age 8 or 9, including their adolescence. How they are loved, respected, cared for, treated, and protected, how they are parented determines their belief system, their self-esteem, their feelings of safety, their feelings of self-importance, ultimately their self-esteem and self-concept. As a child, all of those begin as early as birth. And the way the environment interacts with the child tells the child, you are beautiful, lovable, perfect, even with your mistakes, that no one's more important than you because I love you. That attachment experience creates a strong foundation of mental health that reflects adult self-love. However, if you have a pathologically narcissistic parent, and according to the human magnet syndrome, your other parent's going to be codependent or has self-love deficit disorder, your attachment experience is going to be broken. You're going to have very difficult time attaching with a pathological narcissistic parent. But as explained in my book, the person who's going to become an adult SLD codependent, that child figures out a way to mold to the narcissistic's expectations, figures out a way to mold themselves to the roles that have been pushed upon them, figures out a way to become the friend, the hero, the good child, the easy child, the prince, the princess, the old soul. They somehow find a way to adapt and become this other type of person so that the narcissist parent loves them or at least gives them attention and they are free from harm, the same harm that goes to the other people in the family that cannot do what they do. So their attachment experience is certainly traumatic. And that is the pathway of how we become self-love deficient or codependent. But for the ones that cannot meet those unusual, almost acrobatic, those completely unfair, impossible expectations of the narcissistic parent, that can't find a way to be the good one, the trophy child, all of the other dream aspects that the narcissist wants so that they can feel like they are a loving and good parent. I call that the good parent fantasy, also in my book. If the child cannot make them feel good about themselves, to the narcissist, the child is bad. They have narcissistic injuries. They get angry, disappointed. The narcissistic injury compels them to punish. It can be active punishment by yelling, screaming, abuse. It can be passive punishment by silent treatment, abandonment, neglect, or it can be passive aggressive where they pretend to love someone, where they pretend to love the child, but really they're expressing their anger and their hatred. So the child that cannot figure it out, who cannot help the narcissist fulfill their good parent fantasy, becomes their existential threat. And they receive the brunt of the narcissist's rage and shame. All the pathological narcissists, because of their experience in the attachment phase of their life, experience such deep and pervasive shame-inducing humiliation. They develop this reservoir of core shame, core hatred, belief that no one loves them, they're always bad. There is no way to avoid the development of this core shame, because at the very vulnerable time of their life, when they're supposed to be developing their self-concept, their self-esteem, it's being crushed. It's being hammered thin. And therefore, in their childhood, because of their attachment trauma, their personality disorder is crushed. It is crushed so bad that the core shame is beyond management. It's beyond conscious awareness. It's too big to even think about. So the brain does a trick, and it takes all of that too painful to experience memories of the harm, the abuse, the neglect, and the subsequent development of the core shame. It moves it all into our limbic system, to the part of our brain that is called the amygdala. And trauma is housed in the amygdala. In other words, if we have PTSD and that trauma was so big that we can't remember it anymore, to treat that trauma, a therapist has to be able to get to the memories that are encoded in the amygdala. But for the person who is going to become a pathological narcissist, NPD, BPD, or ASPD, the complete experience of their attachment and the emotional humiliation, degradation, harm, neglect, abuse, abandonment, sometimes sadistic treatment of them, all of those memories get pushed away so they can't remember them anymore. That is why narcissists do not know that they're narcissists. They do not know that they're hurting people. They feel like they are the victim. And the reason this is, and this is how I'm answering this question, is that they cannot get to the core shame that is so big, it's responsible for the creation of these personality disorders. They can't get to it, because if they got to it, they would fall apart. And I've seen this often, and many of my clients experience this, that there are windows when things are going so bad. Usually it's when my client is divorcing or breaking up with a narcissist. There's this window of time that sometimes that door cracks open and they start to remember, recall, and even tell stories of their childhood and the crushing abuse, neglect, and abandonment and deprivation they experienced. And like a broken child, they cry for forgiveness. The only difference between someone who can access those feelings and these personality disordered individuals is, for the latter, the door closes. They never go there again. They never access those feelings, those memories, and certainly don't use them as a manipulative technique to keep the person from leaving them. So pathological narcissists cannot remember the core shame. They cannot experience it. But it's there, and I can prove it. It's easy to prove. Their narcissistic injury is their core shame. Each of these three experiences chronic narcissistic injuries. In other words, if they are upset, disappointed, they react strongly and punitively with harsh consequences to the person that activated or triggered them. And some of these narcissistic injuries are fatal, and some are horribly psychologically disfiguring. But usually, you press the button, you said something, you triggered the narcissist, and now they are fit to be tied, and they're going at you. And they're going to punish you and make sure you understand that what you did was absolutely horrible and should never happen again. In the case someone with BPD, they will cycle through that and remember that they love you and sometimes be apologetic. That doesn't happen with people with narcissistic personality disorder, and it certainly doesn't happen with ASPDs, except when they decide they need to change their approach to you because of the consequences that are going to follow. In other words, if they rage at you and the impact of that is you're going to call the police and you're going to press charges, they're going to be able to moderate that narcissistically injurious reaction. So their anger, their narcissistic injuries, their inability to take responsibility, their inability to modulate or control their emotional reactions all comes from some early, deep psychological trauma at the crucible of at the moment when their personalities are being formed, they were crushed. And they learned the world is dark, unloving, unforgiving, and only they by themselves are going to get what they need. And then they slowly close down and never, ever open up again. And the memories, as I explained, are put away, sequestered in the limbic system, more specifically the amygdala. So that's why they want to hurt you if you trigger them. That's why they take no responsibility. That's why they believe they're good people when evidence shows otherwise. I hope that this video or this podcast was helpful to understand why narcissists behave as they do and understand the difference between the three pathological narcissists and the connection that they have with people who suffer from self-love deficit disorder. If you have a question that you would like me to answer, just like this one, leave it in the description section of the YouTube video or send us an email at help@selfloverecovery.com. If you would like exclusive access to my work, some of the projects that I'm doing, for example, I am writing a workbook to be used for the human magnet syndrome and the codependency revolution. And just tidbits of what's going on and what I'm thinking about and what I'm writing about, consider joining our Patreon program. Just go to our website at selfloverecovery.com and you'll see that in the homepage. Also, if you're interested in full-length seminar videos where I go in minute detail of all of the areas that I've grown to specialize in and have earned a reputation as a specialist or expert in these topic areas, consider my full-length seminar videos, also at selfloverecovery.com. Lastly, if you would like my help, I'm a psychotherapist. And if you identify as self-love deficient or having self-love deficit disorder, give me a call, send me an email, and I'll introduce you to my self-love recovery treatment program or just psychotherapy on issues and challenges that you would like to focus on. So thank you for your time. Be well. And don't forget to write a question so I can answer it next time. Bye-bye.